Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I'm your co-host, JP John Paz. Of course, with me is Mr. Trump Mania himself. He is now known as the Wizard, Mr. Lavi Margolin. Lavi, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, John?
I am doing great. And of course, joining us is our good friend from Variety, the Fast Master himself, Gavin Bridge. Gavin, what's going on today, sir?
Oh, well, just having a lovely day. And it's even better now to be here with you guys.
Thank you.
John did such a good intro that I lost my opportunity for a joke where I was going to say people shouldn't get confused. It's not the Taskmaster today; it's the Fast Master.
Well, I mean, I can be a fast taskmaster. When I read bad articles in the press.
So
hey, good to get you back on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me back.
No, it's a pleasure, and really our third returning guest. So we're so pleased to have you. We have, of course, we've had Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, and of course Brett Lauderdale of GCW. So an eclectic mix for sure.
It's nice to be in the company of those two for their varied reasons. But I'm glad that I'm of a unique group. We should get little lapel pins.
Ooh, be nice. Yeah, that would be a good idea. So, as far as just you, obviously, the Variety, the last time you were on, we were talking about Wrestling Boom, the great WWE article, all those stuff. But now we're talking about some Fast stuff. Just talk first briefly what Fast is. I know we talked about it before, but what it is, and just like catch us up just a bit on Fast.
Sure. So FAST, it stands for Free Ad-Supported Streaming Television, although one of the S's is missing. I didn't come up with the acronym. It's literally a recreation of just like cable TV for the best analogy online. You have 25 or so services now in the US that are offering between, I think Amazon Prime has 15 free channels or 16 now, and the Local Now one, which is owned by Allen Media, is the largest, about 370 plus channels. So there's a wide discrepancy, but they have these streaming channels that you go on. It's different to Netflix, right? Like Netflix, you choose on demand, and there are free on demand services too, like Crackle. You know, you find a title and you say, oh, I want to watch this episode, and it starts from the beginning. I think like how WWE Network work for the most part. The way to think of Fast is and I'll use the wrestling analogy here, WWE Network had that linear streaming channel that was always on, right? Like it would cut to the live events, but otherwise they were programming it. Fast is a distribution format that's like that. You find a channel and you join it in progress. So whatever channel you find, you don't get to start it from the beginning. Like for me, I always talk about this in all of the different panels I do on Fast, where I tend to watch Unsolved Mysteries a lot. It's just, I don't know, I find that channel is like really amusing to me. So you join it in the middle of a mystery, right? Like you don't start the thing from the beginning. And it's set up for the most part on the majority of the services. It looks like a programming guide, like you would get on your cable box. You know, you just kind of scroll through, you find the channels, and you just select the one you want. There's more and more big media brands being involved. Like I've covered this year a lot about AMC and A&E networks. They don't own Fast services, but they have a lot of channels that they've created for it. Paramount is another one. Through their Pluto purchase, they have some. Fox has been bringing out more. Most media companies are embracing this format now. And obviously pro wrestling too. Like we're at the point where there was another one. Let me just look it up for you guys. I did my count yesterday, and I think it was on Sports TV. There's a new pro wrestling channel. They have like a lot of them are independently named. They're not branded, right? But there's let me see. Pro Wrestling TV is the latest one on Sports TV. So we're about, I think it's more than 9 or 10 wrestling channels now on Fast. So it's like that everyone's embracing from big media down to wrestling companies.
How much has Fast grown just in the last year, per se?
A lot. You can measure it. So there's no published figure for Fast like Nielsen for television, right? So you have to do a lot of digging on your own end and come up with different sources, which is what I've been doing at Variety Intelligence Platform, is sort of monitoring the number of channels available on services, the number of services available. And you're seeing this kind of grow and grow. In the last, what's this number here? I can find for you guys. In the last, since January, the number of sports channels, for instance, has gone up 26%. The number of general channels has gone up by 12%, but that's like almost 90 channels because there's so many general channels. News has gone up 31%. That's even in the last 5 months. So you think versus last year, we're looking at like big increases, more media companies getting involved, the media companies who are involved creating more and more channels. Peacock, for instance, which is probably the most interesting to some listening to this because of the WWE's involvement. Let me just pull that one up for you guys. Peacock has grown from 2021 last year, so we're at 43 channels in April last year, and they're at 55 this year. Not a tremendous growth, but even that kind of shows they've added 12 channels on. Everyone constantly adding channels in. The audience is there. It's just it's more of a case of monetizing and attracting them to stay within the system. You know, because if you've ever gone into a fast service like Pluto or Peacock's channels or like Samsung TV Plus or LG Channels Plus, sometimes you just browse through and you click out. The key is sort of finding content that you want to watch. And I think for what I said about there being 9 or 10 wrestling channels, wrestling's kind of underserved in this market because there's not really much that, especially with the news. I know Lavi wants to talk about that one promotion's channel being removed in the last month. It sort of it takes away some of the stickiness, I think, for fans.
Why hasn't Peacock created a WWE Fast channel?
So they have one. I think the question is, why haven't they created a WWE Wrestling Fast channel? So the other day I was on Peacock for some reason, and I did look into it, and they were actually replaying old backlashes, right? They had a backlash marathon going on. That's not normal for Peacock, but also it speaks to another thing, and I don't think that was very well publicized. That I didn't see that picked up anywhere, that Peacock was having a backlash marathon, which I think you'd want to communicate because people would probably tune in to see that. The other thing is the way that the channel, the WWE channel, is currently programmed. It could be very hit and miss with what you want to watch. It's not based around themes. I feel like with the old WWE Network channel, which is still in existence, just not in the US, like they still program that internationally. But there was I feel like often there was thought and theme around what was being shown there. If you go on the Peacock channel, it's either a random episode of Total Divas, which is within the WWE Comcast umbrella, right? Or it could just be like here's an episode of Raw from 2016 in full. There's not much done to really pick what that library has available. So I would think whoever is top at the moment, like, I don't know, let's say Matt Riddle and Randy Orton, you have, you pick out their best matches and you sort of show like, this is a profile on this. We'll spotlight some people. They haven't really made a great deal of that. And I think from a conversation I had with WWE last year, it might be that NBCU themselves are programming that channel, but it's kind of, to me, a bit of a waste of a resource, whoever's programming it, with what you could have available.
It does seem like there could be so much potential there, right? I mean, they could really make some money off of doing that if they wanted to.
Well, yeah, because it's ad supported, right? So I know, like, I won't say their name, but I may have already said their name. One of the media companies is making 25-30 million a year in ads from their fast channels. Now, okay, wow. that's not to me and you, that's amazing. I'd love to make that in a year. To a big multinational company, that's not, going to be the be or end all, but it's still money that you're making for nothing. And especially when you consider fast channels are very, very easy to set up. There's not the cost involved as there is with creating a regular TV network, right? Like it's literally just like it's digital assets. So there's a very low startup cost. So for me, if I'm NBCU or WWE, I'm going to create WWE 80s, WWE 90s, WWE 2000s, WWE 2010s, like, and maybe WWE superstars, that you just have 5 or 6 channels that are geared around different tastes, because that there are different people. Like Lavi, I know you don't watch the modern wrestling very much, but you like older stuff. So you'd probably watch WWE 80s, whereas someone who grew up on the Attitude Era might watch an Attitude Era themed channel. And you'd be able, there's such library available that why wouldn't you, to me, it's like you're leaving money on the table by not doing this.
Big time. That's what I think. And we'll get back into Fast just for a second, but I want to touch on NFTs too. So what's going on with the non-fungible tokens? Because I know Lavi's got a ton of questions, but I wanted to sneak in here and ask you about some NFTs as well, and maybe even WWE's involvement.
So yeah, WWE has a number of NFT plans, but in general, NFTs, the confusing thing about NFTs, I think, is the consumer perception, right? Where you sort of hear all this stuff about Bored Apes or whatever, like these crazy images that are going for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And as a consumer, you're probably like, nah, that's not for me. Whereas the market is slowly moving towards it becoming another form of collectible, like Funko Pops or Pokemon cards or trading cards. And so you're seeing that in 2 levels with WWE in particular. They've made some very good deals. They have a deal with Blockchain Creative Labs, which is Fox's studio for NFTs, which is called WWE Moonsault. And from conversations with them at Blockchain, they've told me that, or Blockchain Creative Labs, sorry, they've told me that there's going to be some sort of story element involved where you can vote. If you buy certain releases, you'll be able to have an input on the direction of a story, which is what a lot of entertainment is beginning to embrace with NFTs. Not necessarily CSI, but there are many projects out there that if you buy an NFT, you can kind of push a story in a certain way. So it's a way for super fans, I think, to have a voice, an ongoing voice in stories, or knowing the way the internet works, it's a way for miscreants with money to sort of come in and hijack things. But so we'll see which way that goes. And they also have I was going to say confusing, to a consumer potentially confusing deal with Panini right now, but they've already announced they're moving their trading card deal back to, was it Fanatics, who bought Topps? So Panini won the rights from Topps for WWE's trading cards, which tends to involve with Panini NFT versions of trading cards. And then that's going to go back to Fanatics once the deal ends. So it will go back to Topps. Where it gets confusing is, and the way an NFT works is it's held on a wallet, right? So if you buy on Panini, you buy a Panini NFT right now, you can only access it by going into panini.com or .net or their app, and then you can view it in there. So if you're a collector, you're going to have collections that reside in different apps, different universes. It's not going to be the easiest situation for someone to keep tracks of their collection. Whereas you think back in the 80s or the 90s, if someone moved companies, your trading card collection didn't just disappear and go into another room or another house. Right, like it was physically, you're just like, okay, now it's coming from Panini or now it's coming from someone else. You still had the physical one in the same location because you literally had it in your hands. Where it works at NFTs, and I think it's going to become, I almost think it could have undercut the value of the Panini deal somewhat, is that they're already signaling, hey, in a couple of years, our collection isn't going to be here. So make of that what you will, but if you're smart, you're going to be like, well, why am I going to have NFT, collection in 2 places that I can't kind of put them in one place and view them at the same time? Does that make sense, or does that sound like a crazy unhinged man ranting?
No, hey, that makes sense. The thing with me is NFTs. Like, is that more popular than the actual, like, physically holding, let's say, like a Hulk Hogan rookie card or some sort, like a rookie NFT versus rookie card? I literally just saw a Japanese rookie card yesterday, $45,000 for the Hogan rookie. So it's like somebody wants to hold that. Is it better to have that or the NFTs? Because the physical one is still popular, but everyone keeps saying NFT, NFT, NFT.
There's 2 different tracks to go on, right? One is an NFT can't get damaged. So if you've got a rare card and someone else has messed their one up, obviously in the real world, you'll want to become more valuable. In an NFT world, they're all going to stay pristine. So that may lower the value of them a little bit over time, so like they won't necessarily reach the heights of trading cards because no one, my NFT can't catch fire, right? Oh, my Babe Ruth, it went up in the fire. Now my money's gone. The other thing to consider, it's a theory I've been pushing a little bit, is knowing how the younger generation is very like the teens really of this era, very passionate about the environment, very passionate about those issues. That passion is gonna keep growing, as assuming last summer wasn't like an anomaly with crazy wild weather. If the environment keeps getting worse, there's going to be a real pushback on things that can have digital alternatives that don't necessarily incur transportation pollution, packaging pollution, all this stuff. So I feel like in the next 5-10 years, you will see a real push from younger consumers actively towards digital counterparts because they just don't bring the amount of waste that a physical one does. You think if you ever buy like a pack of trading cards or like a carton of them, you end up with a big ball of wrapping that you just have to throw out, right? And I think that's going to be something that people are going to become hone in on somewhat in the next couple of years. At least younger. Older consumers will be like, it's always been the way, but the younger ones are going to be pushing more towards the digital-only collectives.
So I got a million questions, but Lavi, you step in here. I know you got a ton as well.
Yes, so I'm going to just ask one NFT question so I don't show my lack of knowledge, and it might be a little bit more leaning towards the legal side. But let's say I was the Mashugana that bought the Undertaker throwing mankind off the Hell in the Cell. Can I take that image and put it, let's say, on TikTok, and then if anyone else is using that image, like have like a takedown notice? Or let's say Dark Side gets on the bad side of WWE and they say you can't use old VHS tapes and use footage like that, but they want to do a documentary on Hell in a Cell. Can I sell them my footage, or it doesn't work like that?
So I'm really leaning into my quick thing. I had my introduction from that copyright law fest I was in the other week. There's two issues you highlighted here. One, on the personal level, if you bought a one of one NFT, so it's like the only one in existence, and someone was using that likeness, I think you could issue a takedown notice to them as a consumer and just say, look, you're purporting that you own this one, you don't, like, and they would probably, the social media platform would probably comply. For the footage, that the best way to think about it is if you bought a DVD, you couldn't air that DVD on like a network, right? And be like, guess what? I've got Star Wars, because someone has paid rights to license Star Wars. So it's the same thing with an NFT. Just you couldn't license out of it, even if you bought the rights to that NFT. More often than not, if not, I think 100% of the time, the copyright holder still maintains copyright. So you might have bought the right to say, I have the only version of this created as this NFT in existence. But that doesn't, unless it specifically says in the terms and conditions that you now own the copyright to it, they're going to maintain that. So you wouldn't be able to license that out to someone else.
No, that makes sense. I'm sort of thinking about like in the 80s. I don't know if you had seen these, but there was like, it was sort of like cards that they weren't exactly holograms, but it would sort of like move, like it would show like Donald Strawberry like hitting a home run. So like you can't say, well, now I have the footage to him hitting the home run. I just have this card, something like that.
I mean, you could maybe use the card and just be like, oh, look, but you could use it as a substitute. But then it depends how, if it's used for commercial purposes, there's probably like an additional, a copyright law that would prevent you from doing that. But if you wanted to make a video of you being like, look, I have this, then they're not going to take that down. The way to think of an NFT is generally like, if you buy, like, let's say you just buy a static image of it. You have the right to put that image on a t-shirt. You want to self-print it. You don't have the right to sell that t-shirt to someone else.
So a few weeks ago, you were kind enough to tweet out all of the wrestling Fast channels, in which I've tried to be patient and hold on to that and not talk about it yet on the show till you arrived. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. So I just had like going through it, sort of like a question for some of them that is specific to that. So
Okay.
one of the things to note is that from what I see, Impact Wrestling and their parent Anthem and potentially Northern Pacific Group, the exact ownership's a little bit murky, but let's say Anthem, they seem to be really, really good at distributing Impact, not only as a fast channel, which we could concentrate on in the moment, but just sort of getting it out there on so many different platforms. Why do you think that's the case, both like maybe in terms of the way the company works, but also potentially based on the content that they have?
It's very interesting you say that, because I'm just going to double check, because I did my list. I'm fairly certain they added themselves to another 2 services in the last month. So that they're really, really out there with embracing fast. And, you know, I think whoever is there in terms of distribution is a very, very smart person. And I'm not just saying that because I'm like, oh, you should hit me up. If you consider the fact that they were really the first company to embrace Twitch as well, like Twitch is a quasi fast in some ways. So it's a logical extension from that. And they also have it with like Fight Network as well, which I don't know if so I obviously steep myself in the fast knowledge. So I'm kind of going through the promo images of every channel, because they have that on pretty much every platform. I don't know how much the Good Brothers are worth in terms of a consumer, perspective, but they are 2 of the 4 featured wrestlers in the Impact promo and the only 2 featured people on the Fight Network promo, which doesn't only feature pro wrestling. So they're really leaning in on that, which I think shows you like the value that they're finding from Impact for distribution. But in terms of why they're doing it, it's a way to reach consumers who either don't have cable or don't have it's a little bit better now that access, I think, is a bit more widespread than the last channel they were on. But not everyone still has access. I didn't have access when I was living in Manhattan and I had Time Warner, or sorry, Spectrum. I just couldn't access it on the package I had. I have it now, now that I've moved to the Bronx, but not everyone has access to it depending on their cable system. So it's a way to increase your reach, and it's also a way to really monetize your old library content. And that's often, I mean, when I've been doing my checks, I think I found one once was like the best of Samoa Joe or something, and I just like, oh yeah, I just stopped working. But I didn't work for like half an hour. Like, yeah, they got Samoa Joe cage matches on this. Okay, I'll watch that. But if you think of the roster of people who have passed through Impact through the years, there are so many high profile names that they can actually use to monetize and to draw people in there. All right. You also wouldn't necessarily want to put your current stuff up because you want to make people watch it live. Yes, I think in some ways perhaps shows the difference between old Impact, where they were setting up decent sized arenas, and the new Impact where it's in a smaller studio. But there's a lot of value in that library that they're actually able to tap into with Fast. That although it's also on the Fight Network, if you kind of find it on cable, it's harder to find. I think like people aren't really clicking into those level, because when you're on cable, right, it's not a seamless scrolling experience like it is in Fast. In Fast, it's quite quick to go through 300 channels. You just use your mouse. If you're thinking of how it is on cable, it's still clunky. You're literally clicking page after page, and you're not really going to get to the channel numbers where Fight Network or Impact is. So it to me, it's a really smart strategy. Whoever's there is a very digital media savvy guy, but also a great way to sort of say, hey, look, we've got these like classic matches from AJ Styles, Kurt Angle, Christian, all these people you still see on TV today, but you can watch some savage stuff. Sting, Jeff Hardy, you could just keep going on. To me, it's a really smart move.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking of Sting because, often the older example was like Hulk Hogan, but, obviously much respect to John. huge Hulk Hogan fan, but and me as well. But like, so for some, it's not as relevant. But for like Sting, you could go on AEW on Wednesday night, and you're like, Sting, Jeff Hardy. They could even, CM Punk wasn't like a big part of what they were doing, but still somebody that can be leveraged today. And to our listeners, Gavin and I figured out that we're in the same neighborhood. We're actually going to be meeting up next week. So I'm going to assume that you have Verizon and not Optimum to have Access TV.
Actually, no, I have Optimum.
Oh, you have Optimum. Do they have Access now?
I'm sure I recorded it once.
Oh, okay. I have to check because I remember for years they didn't. But uniquely, they do have the Fight Network on a premium tier, which is like only, from what I gather from their website, only like 3 stations in the whole country. So that is really a unique thing.
I have the premium tier because I wanted to get New York 1 after I moved. So that's the only way to get that. So then, one day I was like, again, I was scrolling through and I just left that on because and I think that speaks to the draw of Impact to older wrestling fans, where you just like, there's, you may have, like, I watched Impact through to about 2010, I think. And then I just gave up, sadly. But there's that, I wasn't an avid Impact fan. I would never have been like, oh, I love Impact more than WWE, but I was a fan of it. So, like, there's that nostalgia pool where, you're kind of flicking through and you're like, oh, I could actually sit down and watch this. This is something I want to see.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because, like, long after I got tired of WWE, like, I would sort of have Impact on in the background, sort of not actively engaged, but like when it was like Awesome Kong and Mia Kim, or a high profile match like that from the women's knockout division, I'd be like, I would watch that. So they had like a unique element to it. So
actually, you remind me, the last time I really watched it was with the whole Ali Su Yim thing. That was like probably the last time I really got into it. So I do them disservice saying I didn't watch them at 2010. There have been knockout storylines that I have come back for. So you're right. Like they have that content that would sometimes just want you to have it on. And
there's always like curiosity points, like when Billy Corgan was sort of the owner, but then was not sort of the owner later, like, curious to see what happened. So the next thing, and which you really confirmed, which you did confirm for me, once or around the sale of Ring of Honor from Sinclair Broadcasting to what's now being defined as an AEW, I believe, subsidiary or affiliate. Previously, it had been defined as sort of a company under Tony Khan, so whatever that is. But that it had started on Stir, which is Sinclair owned, and then had additionally been added to Plex, which I think is a Fast of some note. Never got anywhere further, but then with seemingly no notice to the audience, it disappeared around the sale time.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this the other day, and the main theory I had, and I hope I'm not going to offend many Ring of Honor-ites. I guess that's what you call them. I'm trying to think of the best way to collectively refer to the fans, but I feel like if that channel had been really like popular, like, necessarily, and I think it was the way it was programmed, because every time I kind of flicked into it, it wasn't necessarily a retrospective best of a particular wrestler. It was just like, hey, it was like their syndication on loop, like here's just a show, here's another show. If it had been wildly popular, I don't know necessarily if it would have been pulled, because it would have been generating a decent amount of ad revenue. I think it probably wasn't, and that's one of the reasons why it wasn't widely distributed. But it, to me, was a missed. I mean, you think about it, like, we know, like, historically, most of the people who we're talking about in Impact were also in Ring of Honor. So there was a big missed opportunity in monetizing that content. But I think they wanted to push more of the modern day stuff rather than say, like, rest on their laurels. You could do a blend, but they just didn't. In my mind, to my recollection, they didn't do that. They just focus on the modern stuff, which it just, however good the tier of wrestler that was in Ring of Honor at the end, every time I sort of watched their syndicated product, it never came up. It always looked sort of like I'd say tier 3 in sort of the US, right? Like it was smaller, very small arenas. It didn't. I'll give you a random tangent, right? The USFL. I think Fox and NBC should be giving everyone free tickets, $50 to spend at the concession stand. Get them in, get the crowd roaring, because then when someone's flicking through, they see a full stadium, they see a energized arena, they're going to want to watch. Oh, this means something. It's this. It goes the same with wrestling, right? Like if you're flicking through, like, oh wow, like I want to watch wrestling. Oh, there's like 50 people here. Like you have to really be invested in one of the performers to necessarily want to watch that, and that's, I think, where Ring of Honor's Fast Channel made the mistake of only focusing on kind of catering to fans who probably already had Honor Club if they were going to be wanting to watch that channel, right? There was really, I don't see what you would get from being a Ring, because you kind of had to be a hardcore fan to want to seek that channel out based on what the content was.
Yeah, and I remember years ago when they were on Destination America, a colleague at work who was about, in his late 50s at the time, he was a big Bruno Sammartino fan, like, stopped watching sort of after that, but somehow, well, it wouldn't be a secret that I was a wrestling fan at work, but somehow he found his way to this channel. He's like, I saw wrestling last night, but there was these two guys and they were talking about chickens. I don't know. I couldn't watch it. And he was done with that. So I have sort of maybe a bridge too far, but like a supposition. If Ring of Honor, and they're both very different types of corporations, and from what I understand, that Sinclair doesn't necessarily always play well with others, but let's say Ring of Honor treated its distribution of its product as proactively and as aggressively as Impact. And I don't think they have as many mainstream stars, but they do have Daniel Bryan, CM Punk in their archive. So there is a way of doing that. If they treat it as proactively, do you think that they would have been in a better financial position? And maybe the question of selling it would have been a more difficult one for Sinclair to make?
I don't know if it would have impacted Sinclair's decision to sell, because they're in that position Viacom were in a couple of years ago, right, where they had to literally sell the family silver to keep going because of what they wanted to become. It may have increased their value, although it sounds like the reports seem to suggest that Tony Khan paid a very good price for it, so perhaps may not have done much for that. But in terms of generate them more profits on an ongoing basis, yes. Like, I mean, the success of All In and then AEW afterwards shows that there is an Impact prior to that. Like, let's not, just because Impact isn't what it used to be, let's not pretend that Impact didn't used to put in like 1.5 million people a week, right? Like, Impact was doing Raw ratings in 2010 before the market changed, right? I'm not comparing the two, saying Impact is as popular or would be as popular today, but it just shows there's always been an undercurrent since WCW went of fans who want an alternative. And they could have easily lent into that when Daniel Bryan was red hot when he debuted in September, right? Or late August, early September last year. Why not just do a Daniel Bryan takeover or Bryan Danielson takeover on Ring of Honor and publicize it? You would have got people watching. Like, to me, it's probably the fact that believing I know how Sinclair operates on like not a shoestring budget, but like they're not known for having extravagance budget. They probably didn't have the programming people in place to try and pull these things together. But I think that you would have generated, I'm not saying everyone who watched AEW would have watched it, but you would have had probably more tripled your audience at the very least, and you would have been able to monetize that over time. Especially if you put that, why not put it on YouTube too, right? Like, there's all these alternative distribution formats out there. To me, it's a waste, and it's going to be to AEW's benefit now, or Tony Khan's benefit now, that they have that extra level of archival footage available.
So, in terms of the fasts that are sort of, as I think you would refer to them, sort of like as non-branded, sort of Wrestling Legends Network, Wrestling Spotlight, Pro Wrestling TV, Brit Bash, I get the sense that Pluto TV Pro Wrestling Channel would be sort of far and away of the non, company branded stations, the most popular and engaging. And with their first stream, hopefully not the last, I know there were some technical issues to manage, which always happens in pro wrestling, but to stream Defy, what do you think that sort of says about the strength of this channel and their willingness to try things and invest?
The interesting thing is that they'll be signing the rights to different promotions who haven't haven't necessarily signed a deal with WWE or anyone else. So there are, we obviously know, like Defy being a good example, there are promotions out there. Even GCW could potentially sign a deal to sort of stream their content over time to someone, and not necessarily, it's kind of a hands-off deal, right? Like you don't have to invest. It's the same logic that WWE gives for signing the Peacock deal. We don't have to deal with the tech side anymore. We just give someone our content and we'll get like 50, maybe 60% of the revenue, depending on who the partner is, from the ads for doing this. I think Pluto is doing it not necessarily to make $1 million, but they're doing it because they know there's a passionate fan base out there who they can monetize, and they can kind of cross sell, right? Like they'll run promos of things that they think wrestling, like perhaps anime or e-games, perhaps cliched sort of interest, but they will run promos for their other content out there to sort of boost their engagement time, to increase the amount of hours that they spend on Pluto as a whole, and therefore they're able to monetize to advertisers. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a honey trap to like bring people in, but it definitely helps as a way to sort of keep people within that ecosystem, because you could just be like, oh look, we've got wrestling too, and just you should think of, I know it didn't do amazing numbers, but think even of how like Lucha Underground managed to get a good following out of really nothing, right? Like there was no one really pushing that. Did you ever see a promo for Lucha Underground on a TV network? But it still managed to pull in a certain amount of viewers on a very small network. So it's a similar example, I think, where they know if they have decent content, people will come for it. And the beauty of Fast is you could repeat that on a 4-hour loop, right? Like every couple of hours, you just repeat the same programming. They'll be able, as long as they're communicating, social media targeting being easy to do now, you could put it in front of people and get them to sample your Fast service and then stick around for other content.
Actually, I'm so glad you mentioned Lucha Underground, because it transitions my question with another Fast, Lucha Libre AAA. Most curious to me was that while the lawsuit was ongoing, in that there were exclusive rights to promote or distribute in the US, I don't believe the AAA Fast channel ever went dark. Do you think, if that's the case, do you think that it was considered sort of a different market, sort of like a niche within a niche, or maybe it just flew under the radar?
It either flew under the radar or it was licensed specifically, and it would have been like, you'd have to then involve like Paramount or something, and that just wasn't something that was anyway worth the time or energy of that lawsuit. But it is, I did think that too at the time, like, wait, I think one time I was going through, it's like, how is this happening knowing that lawsuit is going on? They could have argued that it was it was part of their operations, and you couldn't just stop it because of that, of the lawsuit. But yeah, it's interesting, but to me, it's a great example that you bring up, because I feel like there's a great push among Fast services right now for Spanish language content, and that just hasn't really taken off, other than, I haven't seen it grow in the last 12 months. It hasn't gone on any new platforms. It's just stuck. I think it's only on Pluto at this point. Like it's just there, and that's it. And it is odd in the sense of everyone's kind of scrabbling for this content, and you see Combate America is on VIX, for instance, right? Like they're finding different, and yes, VIX has an investment in Combate, but there's still, there's this appetite for native, in particular, content, I think, that could appeal to Mexican Americans, that they can relive or feel tuned into the homeland. And it's just weird that it really hasn't become more than it is.
So on Twitter, before, I believe that you've actually tweeted Tony Khan, who you've interviewed multiple times, that they should have a fast channel. So given AW's scope in terms of their Turner deals and other distribution plans, why do you think having a fast would be really helpful for them?
Two things. One is as good as it's done, not everyone has cable these days. You see the number of people is still cutting the cord every month, or every quarter where it's reported. So if you want to reach your maximized number of viewers, you need to go to where viewers are. And as good as AEW is, I don't think anyone's going to literally sit down and be like, well, I don't have cable, but I'll spend $60-$90 a month just to watch AEW. Maybe they'll do that for a pay-per-view, but it's just a way to increase your reach. At this point too, they have a really substantial library to be able to create themed programming around older content. You could do like you could either do the best of an era, best of 2020, best of 2019, best of year one, best of year two, or you could do it around particular wrestlers, like the best of Jon Moxley, the best of Penta, best of the Young Bucks. Really kind of draw people in. I know from the conversations I've had with him, Tony doesn't, and rightfully so, doesn't see it as a means to primarily at this point in time distribute original content, like first airings, pay-per-views, that sort of thing. Which makes sense, because you'd have to really, really kind of hope that everyone's going to tune in for that, even if you had it on a repeat. And why give up, the amount of rights money you're giving up from that? Was it at the moment $40 million a year? Should be going up more based on sports trends. You're not going to make that back in advertising. You'd have to sign some sort of exclusivity deal with like the Roku channel or someone, and hope that they kind of give you a similar rights deal to make that short for up. But he's very in favor of talk shows, panel shows, discussions, that sort of thing, where you can further monetize the content without it being seeming like a clip show, repeat show. I kind of think to like how Main Event is, where they have like one or two original matches, and then it's just like, here's an entire clip from SmackDown without anyone discussing it. And I think that it's a much better format where if you have talking heads kind of going through it, like Sports Center or something, then you'd be on a winning formula.
Great. So that this doesn't turn into an R video shoot interview, I have 4 brief general media questions that I wanted to hit you with before turning over to John, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So in having a deep understanding of how media works, how does the whole MLW WWE lawsuit shake out to you? To me, like, part of it feels like a little bit of like fantastical. We sort of like have this image of Vince McMahon making demands, but like in the real world, quote unquote, sometimes media isn't necessarily so. Like, when you hear about the facts of this case, like, how does it sound to you?
See, unless it's been orchestrated as like a long-term screenwriting ploy, there's definitely some points of interest in it to me. Thinking of the amount of times that MLW would be about, was it Court Bauer would be like, oh, I've got this massive announcement coming soon, and then nothing ever happened. Right? I think we joked about this last year.
and we did, now that you remind me.
Right? And that was like year 3 of this. So it kind of seemed weird. And then there was that rumor at the time that when Ring of Honor and New Japan wanted to run MSG, and there was they really tried to block that, and eventually it fell through. But there's been, I'm not trying to cast aspersions here, but there has sort of, if you look between the lines, there's definitely shades of gray in sort of how things have been reported in the past and how behavior may have or may not taken place. The way it has been cast almost makes it sound like MLW sees that WWE saw them as like a direct threat and they tried to extinguish them, which I don't think they would be. But and I don't think anyone at WWE would ever even think that MLW could become a threat even to NXT, let alone like rival Raw or SmackDown. but there's just, to me, there's just like something strange there, right? Like to come out with that kind of claim, and like I say, like knowing the MSG story with the Super Show from Ring of Honor and New Japan, there does seem to be a little bit of smoke. So it'll be interesting to see if like it was just one person who was just acting nutty and really overstepped their boundary, or if there really isn't anything there. But it's something I have my eye on, put it that way, because it sounds like it could. I give it like a 30% shot, but it could bloom into something where you're just like, oh my goodness. But to that note, I mean, you know, like you saw that stuff about Vice last week, right? With Dark Side of the Ring, and is Dark Side of the Ring renewed or not? And I've been saying for the longest time, how has WWE had all these deals with A&E whilst Dark Side of the Ring is on an A&E funded network where they have at least a 50% stake, and it bashes them all the time? Like, to me, it was very, very strange that was happening. And I feel like it may not have been them, but it could have been A&E being like, guys, like, you need to tone this down because we've got a lot riding. Look how good our biography series did. And look at it in the cold, hard light of business. Their biography series on the WWE Superstars last year pulled in many, many more numbers than Dark Side of the Ring ever did, even in its best, you know, outing. So if you're weighing up the pros and cons of which franchise should we keep, you're going to go with the one making more money, and you're not going to try and upset your partner who's involved in that.
We'll know if something changed if they like try and paint the Khan family, like be like Shahid Khan supported Donald Trump in the election. So given the, I don't know, I'm going to use the word abysmal. You can correct me, but given the abysmal ratings of New Japan on Access TV, the surprisingly low ratings of MLW on Fightland, minuscule ratings on BN, although I don't think one could really make much of that. But sort of like these, as you described, like it's, well, New Japan in the US, sometimes it's like, we're like, hey, we just sold out United Center with AEW, so we're tier 1, but at other times they're like tier 3. But given these efforts outside WWE and AEW, do you think it seeds the market to say, like, unless there's a really big concept that pro wrestling outside of a 1 and 1A is not viable in the mainstream US media landscape?
I think it's a game of smoke and mirrors when it comes to pro wrestling in the media landscape, to be honest with you. Whereas it has to be presentation based, right? And by that I mean either big superstars or big arenas with fans, not necessarily huge arenas, because, you know, like you watch Wednesday nights, AEW isn't always in these tremendously massive basketball arenas. They might be in a college town arena that can seat 5,000-6,000, but that still looks great on television, right? Like, because you've got rows and rows and rows. It's like WCW when they used to go to like Virginia, and you know, they used to do that. When I did my binge of Nitro a couple of years ago, I noticed every month or two they were back in North Carolina, Virginia for a small loop, and then they'd go to another town and they'd kind of hit like those local markets. We live in a very, very presentation based world, and it needs to look like it's worth someone's time. And if it's people they've never heard of in an arena with a couple of hundred people, then you've got to be a real hardcore person to want to watch that. I guess you could say the exception to the rule, given their success on pay-per-view, is GCW, but they know who they're catering to. They're not trying to cater towards a certain market. They're just they've got their business, and they're like, we know that we can run an arena with 2,000 people, but we'll get like 50,000 buys or 20,000 buys, and it works for them. To me, it's just and I will say, I did say on Twitter to you that New Japan was going to do bad. So I don't know if it's done as bad as I said it would do, but I knew I was like, it's not going to do amazing. And I think it is, in particular, like there was such a buzz when New Japan was doing okay on Axis. It was because of the Kenny Omega story. There was a lot of recognizable figures in the Bullet Club. Now it's really kind of petered out, partly, or I'd say mostly because of the pandemic, that they haven't been able to tap into their stars, and that's really hurt them. Like like we're literally just based on appearances. I think, sadly, it sounds like a very, very shallow society, but it is, it's kind of true. Like you're not good if someone started a new football league, an outlaw football league, I don't know, if a bunch of billionaires clubbed together and they took away most of the good players from the NFL, I bet you the NFL ratings would go down and people would watch the Renegade League. And it's a weird analogy, but I think that's how it works with these other wrestling shows. It's just the talent isn't there. Like, think of MLW's talent base 3-4 years ago, well, probably 4 years ago, because I know AEW signed a lot of them, but it used to be stacked. And now it's still decent, but it's nowhere near what it used to be.
So last one from me. So probably the only wrestling promotion I've campaigned to work for, just because he seems like a really fun guy, Freddie Prince Jr. Billy Corgan has talked about in the past sort of like how his name has opened doors, but sort of what the expectations are of the media companies, where like it would be Billy Corgan on screen with wrestling. Like, what do you think are some potential scenarios that Freddie Prince Jr. might face? Let's say like an ideal scenario in terms of getting a media deal. What type of program might that look like? And what do you think the prospects are?
I'll give you the wild answer. I'm sure an executive will give you a show, but Sarah Michelle Gellar has to be an on-screen commissioner or something crazy like that. I'm sure it's going to be a celebrity-based, like just celebrity involvement, right? His involvement, perhaps some other people. Like he clearly can open doors. Like I'm sure he hasn't been the only person to put. What was it, $3 million? Was that what he said he had initially? But his budget is.
I know he had to fund it for 3 years. I'm not sure if he gave a number.
Okay, so let's say funded for 3 years. I'm sure it's not just him. He has access to different backers. He also has that writing room experience from WWE, which he's been discussing a lot. Like he's not someone just coming in like, I'm a fan, I want to do it. Like he actually knows how to create programming. He wasn't there when WWE was arguably at its nadir. So he could be like, I wasn't involved in that bit. Like I was actually involved when people responded a bit more accurate, positively to it. I would imagine a network. I mean, it's kind of too bad that CYN started up, because you could argue some of the people in that without tarnishing their brand, because I feel like, well, people say that, but if they turned up, people are like, oh my God, he's there, but like at the moment, it's like, I don't know, like what you're going to achieve. They could have been a part of Freddie Prince Jr.'s promotion and it would have come across a bit better. He's got connections. I mean, let's get wild. Maybe he knows he has a hookup to get Bray Wyatt some Hollywood movie roles, and he'll have him perform it in that. He would be a centerpiece. Like, and there's a couple of those floating around. Obviously, not as many as there were, because Tony Khan does sign a lot of them. But there are still some people. But if I'm a network, I'm like, you need a presence, right? Like what I was saying with like what New Japan or MLW lacks. You need a big name or big names, and that might have to be off-screen talent as well as on-screen talent, but you need something that's going to make people be like, oh, I really want to check this out. And I think he might have the connections to do it more than Billy Corgan, because Billy Corgan was a musician, whereas he's an actor slash writer.
No, 100%. Like with the control your narrative, I had posted I don't know if you call it meme or whatever, but like I'd be like, control your narrative, and you see the person frowning, and then Freddie Prinze Jr.'s promotion, they have like a huge smile. So like to make it work. John?
What is the percentage of people that have cable versus just streaming? Like the people that cut the cord, is it like 66 to 33? Like what's the actual percentage there?
That's a really good question, because there's no way to 100% tell anymore. Because like DirecTV stopped reporting, and YouTube TV rarely ever shares. But I think you're probably about 60, maybe 58% now of people have cable, and 40% or so don't have cable.
So just logically, then WWE and AEW could never reach the heights of the Monday Night Wars if only you're losing 40% of the audience right off the bat, or off the tip, or 30, depending on how accurate the number is.
Very true, John. And I wish you worked at a media company, because it would make things a lot. It seems like an obvious fact, but yeah, people just don't tend to grasp that. I mean, even I know he follows me on Twitter, and I'm a fan of his prior work, but like Eric Bischoff will say stuff sometimes. I'm like, it's not the same world. Like you can't compare how things used to be with today, because not only do fewer people have cable, but there's very few content pieces outside of the NFL that dictate to people, I must watch this live, right? Like most people will watch on a replay or on their DVR if they do have cable. So you've got a lot more, there's a lot more choice out there, and that choice is what's really impacting the viewership numbers. I mean, also true, if you're putting out a product that necessarily isn't the best it has been, then people might opt to watch it on a replay or DVR so they can fast forward some bits and skip some bits. So you're never gonna, potentially you could, because maybe they could do NFL regular season numbers if they really managed to find lightning in a bottle. Like the NFL shows, it's still possible, and Yellowstone to a degree.
Yeah, Yellowstone gets huge rating.
Right, but that's also, Yellowstone was a very fascinating case study because it was the only show around that doesn't have availability on streaming the next day. So people had to watch it on TV or on a measurable TV replay, and that's what pushed the ratings up. So it kind of shows you like there's, and we might see this, Nick Khan is a cagey man when it comes to entertainment, and I wouldn't be surprised when they renegotiate their streaming rights, which I think are coming up in a year or so, if he doesn't ask for there to be like a week or two's delay. So you can't just, oh, you know what, I won't pay for cable because I can watch Raw on Hulu the next day. That era might be gone.
Interesting. Now, Amazon, I guess they always owned IMDb TV, but now they have Freevee. Technically, I don't know. Did they always own IMDb TV, or what's the case there? That's a fast channel, right?
It has about, it just went up to like 70 plus fast channels on there now. Now it's Freevee. So yeah, they're like the dark horses to watch, right? Because I would say Amazon likes anything that can be monetizable, and pro wrestling definitely is something that has a passionate fan base that is easily monetizable. So if I'm looking at rights expirations, particularly there's been a lot of discussion about what's going to happen to AEW now Discovery's in charge. Why is no one, not kind of tangent, but why is no one saying what's going to happen to the NHL now is Discovery in charge? What's going to happen to the NBA now? Discovery has a massive European international sports business. They have the Olympic rights in so many countries. People really need to figure it out before they start saying this. Discovery as a corporation understands the value of live sports and how it can bring an audience in. I only go in that road because I'm saying that people who think that Discovery will cancel AEW, Amazon would be a great kind of person to suck that up. I know that was kind of a road.
Yeah. Before AEW started, I knew somebody that was associated with Amazon. Like, who are the hot free agents? They were asking all these weird wrestling questions. Like, what do you care about wrestling for? Like, Amazon cares about wrestling. Like, what the hell? And they want to know, like, the Kenny Omegas and like this person, that person. And then AEW came and never heard back from them again. Like, they didn't care about wrestling anymore. But now you have, like the Bray Wyatts of the world, maybe, and you could do it on Freevee. You know what I mean? Instead of regular Amazon. There's a possibility out there. It seems like there's a market for fast and wrestling, especially with the niche audience. I mean, they're passionate as hell.
I agree, and especially with these bigger name stars who you can, like Bray Wyatt was making what almost half his contract money off of merchandise, right? Like he's someone who, if you're a company that makes its money selling stuff, you would be like, oh, we could censor something around that. And I did think when I first read it, the initial thought was they would be a great fit for Freddie Prince Jr. because it's his entertainment there, and it's kind of like a match made in heaven to a degree. I'm not suggesting it will be like selling out arenas of 6,000, 7,000 people from the outset, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of deal between them, especially with Freevee, because why not do the regular shows on Freevee and the pay-per-views on Prime Video? Then you're making people upsell, but it's also affordable, but you're reaching as many people as possible. Like, to me, that would be a very, very smart model.
And Bray Wyatt, very, very smart not to be an Impact, not to be an AEW, because I feel like his value keeps going up and up. I always follow the autograph scene. His autograph is like it went up, and like him at personal appearances up because he's not doing anything. It's almost like people are dying to see him. They put his merch on WWE on discount, then they took it off discount and put it back at regular price. So like everything is going up by the fact that he's not doing the wrestling stuff. So I feel like if somebody gets him, now his value is so high. Like then, oh shit, I want to see what Bray Wyatt's up to.
I mean, at this point, he's got to be the most valuable free agent. I mean, Braun Strowman, also a former WWE champion, but CYN sort of maybe making him seem a bit like a nut to some. I'm not saying he is a nut, but like, you know, polarized America, people are going to be like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that guy. Bray Wyatt, yeah, he's just sitting back and just like, well, he's comfortable, and he, you know, it's a very old school mentality too. He knows eventually someone is going to need. It's so clever. Someone's going to need that ratings boost, and they're going to knock on his door because they get, and he's going to say, this is my asking price. And if you need that hit, which is what, to be fair, wrestling has become a very short term, right, like jolt of adrenaline business these days. And yeah, he didn't take it to, he didn't get the grumps about it. He didn't go and badmouth anyone. He didn't do any interviews where he was talking shit about anyone. He's just like sat there, done a movie that no one knows anything about other than it's a movie, right? Like I've never heard anything other than he's done a movie. And he's just, I guess, enjoying life, marrying JoJo and just having a good time.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, just fascinating that he's still out there. You know what I mean? Like, wow.
Yeah, you'd think by now someone would have snatched him up.
Yep. Smart though, because you know what it said, the absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think that's what's happening with him.
Oh, anywhere he turns up, people will lose their minds because they'll just be like, yeah. Because I mean, however it was managed, he was such a hot commodity on a number of occasions with what he created. So like people, you know, in terms of he's able to deal with like recent nostalgia, right? Like not like nostalgia for 10, 15 years ago, although maybe at this point 10 years ago was when the Wyatt family was beginning to start, you know, flexing its muscles. But he has that, it's just that extra impact. It's the umami of personality, basically. Like it's that intangible thing to define, but people are going to go like just lose their minds when he appears somewhere.
Now, Gavin, we could probably talk to you all day, but let's head towards the plugs. Give us everything you got, social media, where everybody can follow you, and even some of your latest writings.
All right, so Twitter is iRuleTV. LinkedIn is probably the only other one. Oh, wait, no, there's LinkedIn, so that's, I think, G Bridge, but probably should follow me because I did disable additions because I just was getting random people I didn't know all the time. And it's all like interesting things I post about the state of media and business there. If you're very interested in Fast, then there's the fastmaster.substack.com, or is it substack.thefastmaster? Just search for the Fastmaster on Substack. You'll find it. That's something where I really go into detail on Fast every month with stuff that Variety probably would get a bit too, this is a bit too granular, right? In terms of what I've been doing on Variety Intelligence Platform, a lot of stuff on NFTs, a lot of stuff on Fast, stuff as well on like the state of TV. I did a recent 2-part special on just really the constant mistakes TV made in the last 10 years, and how it led to where we're at today. And also, like, I guess I would say just follow LinkedIn or Twitter or Lavi, because he does a good job of retweeting anything of note. Like, if I get another Tony Khan interview, that will probably be you'll be able to find it there one way or another. But those would be the prime places to find me.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com, patreon.com/tmptempire. Lavi, what do you got?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, Lavie Marg, LAVIE MARG. And something we didn't have a chance to discuss today, but you could begin thinking about it. Check out my long form article on LionCubJobSearch.com. Is there a market for Tony Khan and AEW to obtain rights-based national television distribution for Ring of Honor?
Good stuff.
Very good question.
Yeah. Let's check that out for sure. Of course, we're the official business podcast of SE Scoops. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week.